The Indians defend what is theirs, and the white men covet what belongs to others. Until 1996, many logging, fishing, and hunting families invaded and made themselves at home in this indigenous land, killing the Indians that got in their way. That year, Sydney turned the situation around altogether. He succeeded in delimiting the Indian territories and expelled hundreds of settlers who now hate him more than they do the Indians. Their floating houses were towed downriver by order of law. These were times of great tension in which the Brazilian government, by means of the Department Possuelo directs, found itself obliged to force the hands of those people who despised the indigenous reality of this river basin. The white man was forced to abandon the territory he had robbed from the Indians, but it was not they who expelled him, but rather one of his own. A fact he found not only incomprehensible, but also humiliating. Possuelo himself gave us these images, in which he is both the cameraman and the lead actor. Their quality may not be great, but their content is. Thanks to them, we are going to be exclusive witnesses to the first friendly encounter with the fearsome Korubo, the Indians who killed Raimundo's father, the same tribe that has been watering these forests with its own blood for years, as it has been hunted down and nearly wiped out. The most experienced FUNAI members took part in an expedition that lasted several months. And under Sydney Possuelo's leadership, it was possible for the first time to enter the home of these wild Indians who clubbed their enemies to death. For the first time, these people find themselves face to face with their enemy. They are nervous and excited. Today, Sydney and his men feel the same thrilling sensations that Orellana or Pizarro felt when they faced a different human population. But he is a peacemaker, and his personality is overwhelming. Despite the fact that they don't speak the same language, the Korubo are content and calm in this first meeting. The group Sydney films, contacted for the first time, is made up of 17 people, 4 adult women, 5 men, an adolescent boy and girl, 2 young girls, and 4 boys. It is an isolated clan that was separated from the rest of the community, as we later found out, about 10 years ago. There are probably not more than a total of 300 people in this tribe. Like Possuelo himself, they are in danger of extinction. Although their white enemies know them as Korubo, they call themselves Huichombo. The interpreters taking part in this delicate mission admit that they can't translate much, but they recognize that the language of these recently contacted Indians belongs to the Pano-linguistic family and is similar to that of other indigenous peoples in the Javari Valley. In this expedition, Sydney Possuelo sought to contact one of the last isolated human groups that remained on the planet. His strategy consists of communicating trust to the indigenous group and to show the world the friendly side of a group of Indians until then labeled as bloodthirsty. It wasn't the first time that this backland Indian tracker had achieved this. In his 30 years of fieldwork, and having hiked through more than 3,000 kilometers of virgin forest, he has already contacted 7 previously unknown ethnic groups.
This is a group of Aurora Indians, the second or third group that has been contacted. It has an interesting characteristic, as we can see in this photograph. This man and this other here have beards. This is something hard to find in an Indian. This was a very persecuted group, and we wanted to approach them very gently. We had to be very cautious. To do this, Luis Miguel, it took us 8 years to make the first contact.
And how do you go about doing it, Sydney? How do you earn their trust? Through presents, gifts? Because for them, all white men are from the same family. We're all relatives.
Exactly. But what most distinguishes some white men from others is their behavior because of their gifts. The white men who shoot the Indians also give gifts, many times to attract them and afterwards to shoot them. So they think better. They perceive better when you behave differently. Then they think that one man is different from another because he does different things.
It's very interesting to observe how the exchange of the objects necessary for human life can be found in any part of the world. The Huichombo, a Stone Age tribe, are happy to receive pots and pans made out of a new material, metal. In exchange, they hand out piles of ears of corn. These human beings were accustomed to receiving another kind of gift, also made of metal, but lethal: the lead bullets that killed so many of their relatives. Sydney and his men are very polite and careful with these people. This friendliness, in addition to being a novelty in these forests, is their life insurance. An inappropriate gesture could set off an undesired event, turning the operation into yet another unfortunate fact. Possuelo and his men are armed. But as Rondon said a century ago, it is better to let yourself be killed than to murder an Indian.
This photo reflects one of those difficult, disagreeable moments. Here is a companion of mine, Alfonso. Alfonso Alves, in 1979, in an attack that the Arara Indians made on that front, and that tried to get closer to that group of individuals. 3 people were injured in the attack, and Alfonso is here with 2 arrows that hit him. One penetrated here in his left shoulder and stayed more or less in this position. It entered here in the shoulder and came out the back, and the other arrow entered between the ribs. The problem is that this kind of arrow has these notches here, see? It enters and penetrates, but afterwards it doesn't come out. It stays here inside of you.
Alfonso is an old friend of Sydney's who, as we have seen, very nearly died. He feels respect and admiration for Possuelo, and he follows him wherever he goes, whether that means receiving recognition from their government or on a dangerous expedition. 12 years after the Arara shot him with arrows, we find him in the thick of it, working with the Korubo Indians. 12 years full of satisfactions and of dangers. When Sydney Possuelo decides to contact these unknown ethnic groups, things seem to be at their worst point. It's very difficult for him and his men to explain their real intentions to a threatened and persecuted people without sharing a common language. And as happened on October 26, 1996, some inexplicable rituals could presage an act of vengeance. We inhabit the same planet, but we do not belong to the same world, and on these expeditions, the slightest mistake could cost one one's life. That afternoon, the recently contacted Korubo, wearing new clothes, danced to one side. Who knows? They might be celebrating their next human sacrifice.
They started to sing, and the men were worried. You see, the expression of concentration. They are in an absolute trance. Then we didn't know. It wasn't just the 3 that were there. We didn't know what happened to the rest, to the others. Did they follow us? Were the rest of them waiting to attack? We didn't know if the others were at home or hiding.
As Sydney admits, while he filmed this intriguing dance and his team rested, he wasn't sure that they would live to see the next day.